Okay, so we're going to start muscle tissue. Remember, the four different types of tissues are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, and muscle tissue and nerve tissue. Muscle and nerve are not too difficult. The epithelium and connective are a little bit more challenging because there are so many subcategories. Muscle and tissue is only three. There are three different types of muscles. We covered this in our first lecture of anatomy and physiology when we talked about the 11 systems and we got into the muscular system. We were focusing on the skeletal muscle, but there's also cardiac and smooth. So skeletal muscle is voluntary. You have conscious control over it. Cardiac and smooth muscle is involuntary. When we look at it under a microscope, we look at skeletal muscle and we see that it has these dark and light bands, dark and light proteins. When we get into skeletal muscle, in a future lecture, we'll get into a little bit more detail of these protein fibers called actin and myosin. They are light and thin, meaning when light passes through these two different thin and thick proteins, it gives it a dark and light type of appearance called striations. So skeletal muscle is known as striated muscle, but so is cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle also has these striations. However, when we look at skeletal, we see how these collagen fibers, they're pretty much linear and very parallel, and we don't see branches. But in cardiac, we can see that one of the key features is that it is branched. It's branched, striated muscle. One of the other unique features to cardiac are these intercalated discs. These lines, these darker red lines that we see here, are called intercalated discs. Intercalated discs are where one cardiomyocyte and another unite. They come together at these gap junctions. If you think back to what brings cells together, there are different types of cell junctions. There's tight junctions, gap junctions, desmosomes, hemidesmosomes, adherens junctions. These are intercalated discs. They're formed by gap junctions, and gap junctions are used for fast, rapid forms of communication. When we look at the heart, we have the two upper chambers that are the atria and the two lower chambers that are ventricles. And both atriums contract at the same time, and both ventricles contract at the same time. How do these two know to contract in sync? And how do these two chambers know how to contract in sync and in harmony? It's because of the gap junctions. These cells communicate with each other super fast. Okay? Again, skeletal muscle, striated, cardiac muscle, striated. Skeletal muscle, voluntary, cardiac muscle, not voluntary. It's involuntary. Here in skeletal, you can contract your triceps or biceps on command, but you can't increase and decrease your heart rate on command. Can you increase your heart rate? Can you slow it down? Yes, you can, but you can't control it like you can contracting your arm muscles. If I say flex your arm, you can do it instantly. If I said increase your heart rate from 72 beats per minute to 100 beats per minute, you can't do that spontaneously. You have to have maybe stressful thoughts. You have to exercise quickly to do that. If you have meditational music and relaxing music, you can calm it down, but it does take a while to do that. Okay. The third type and the final type is smooth muscle. Smooth muscle, we have these smooth spin-shaped cells, right? These are very, very different with a central nuclei. These are not striated. There's no striations, which is why it's called smooth. They are arranged in this closely packed sheath. And we find these in our organs, primarily in the digestive tract. You're going to have it in the stomach, and you're going to have it in the small intestine and the large intestine. You'll have smooth muscle in arteries. You'll have them in your trachea, right? Just because smooth muscle here, these walls of the small intestine and colon, they have muscle, they have smooth muscle, they can contract. That's what moves the food through here, is the peristalsis, or the peristaltic contractions. Arteries. Arteries have a layer called the um, media, right? You have this internal layer, you have a middle layer, and then you have an external layer. That middle layer of muscle is called the tunica media. The internal layer is called the tunica interna, and the external layer is called the tunica externa. So the tunica media is also known as the musculosa. It is the muscular layer that can constrict or dilate. When smooth muscle of arteries constrict, we call it vasoconstriction, your blood pressure goes up. When the blood vessels dilate, we call it vasodilation. For vessel dilation, blood pressure goes down. Smooth muscle is around the uterus. A uterus can contract during the time of month, during labor. It's involuntary. You can't control it. So smooth muscle is involuntary. We have to think of around the walls of hollowed organs. It's involuntary. Okay, so again, we have skeletal muscle, striated, voluntarily controlled; cardiac muscle, striated, highly branched with intercalated discs, involuntary; and smooth muscle, they're spindle shaped, there are no striations. We found them in arteries, we find them in organs, the digestive tract, we find them along blood vessels, again, smooth. When we come back, we will finish with the fourth type, which is nervous tissue.